Okay. Hey, this is the start of our monthly Patreon meetings, and we have a basically these are just any random questions that might come in and individually helping patrons that might need it, either in their home games or their professional games. And today we have JW who has a few questions. JW, if you'd like to start, what do you got for me?
Sure. I guess let's start off with I want to ask you Friday about audience building.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to get not only on like say the start playing platform, getting eyes and there, but maybe also on your social media like Twitter or places like that. Is that an okay topic?
Yeah, that's fine. What platforms are you thinking about right now besides SPG?
I mostly am on Twitter and Reddit. Those are kind of the two main like social medias that I
Right.
use.
Okay, cool. Can you link me to both? For you?
Yeah, sure. You bet.
Let's go ahead and DM it to me.
You got it. Give me just one sec.
And some general stuff that I will say about Twitter and Reddit. Those are both A+ social media outlets, I think, for audience building for a number of reasons. Um, Twitter is more geared towards short copywriting style, and that's generally what you're going to find to be the most useful method of approaching that. Whereas Reddit is the opposite, where you are actively creating high value posts that you hope other people will get a lot out of. And then they subscribe essentially to your profile, and then they start following you, and then they start wanting to follow your content. So a good example for modeling your Reddit content would be to check out r/Cursive Strahd. Are you familiar with that Reddit?
Oh yeah, yeah. I've seen it a few
hmm
times.
So there are a few different creators in that niche that are pretty much the breakout members of that community, and they have built entire platforms on it. So Mandy Mod and then also Dragnacarta are the two people that you're going to want to look into. And you can kind of look at their transition to other platforms like Patreon, for instance, or some of the other content that they make, which to varying degrees you can consider what their success level is for that. But it's definitely a start. I think it's difficult on a platform like Reddit to monetize it. So you definitely don't want to do that. You're putting your best stuff out there so that people want to pay you for more premium services elsewhere, right? So for Dragna for instance, and someone I am very familiar with because of my consumption of their content, they went a few different routes with what they were doing. They built an entire campaign guide with additional content that eventually became a searchable / widely used and distributed um, piece of content that they basically put up there for free, right? It's probably one of the most in-depth for free uses of Reddit that I've seen in the D&D community. And um, I'm not sure if they're like satisfied with the amount of money that they make given their Patreon or whatever, which I haven't checked their numbers lately. So I'm not sure, and I don't know if they just do this completely as a hobby or what. But if you were following like the Dragna Carta method as sort of a model, I would say that Reddit is very good for funneling people to where you want them to go. I would also check out the YouTuber named Lunch Break Heroes. And that is a person who has consistently posted things within Reddits and then gained a lot of traction with their content in the same vein of Curse of Strahd. So a lot of their videos are basically guides that they offer on Patreon for $1. So you can subscribe to their Patreon for $1, and then you will get essentially the video guide just in a PDF form. And they have since launched Kickstarters and all of this other content. But because the entry level is so low to support that person via video on YouTube, and they have their call to action being these Patreon plugs essentially in their videos, and they are providing something that has a high amount of value, that is where they are really capitalizing on their audience to monetize it. So let's say that you are, for instance, building content that people want to use, or like NPCs or whatever D&D type content that you're doing. If you make it easily accessible, then people are just going to return to it because you become an expert. You do want to, in any place that you're building a brand, be viewed as an expert. And it's really easy to do that, to be honest, as long as you're good at it. If you're not good at it, then people won't view you as an expert. And it's really that simple. So the popularity of your thing that you create over and over is really going to determine whether or not you've built up that expertise. So there are a few different things in play here. We have being a subject matter expert on whatever it might be, and that just takes time. You posting content and people like coming to know your brand and know you, and then trust in the stuff that you're putting out and whether or not it is good content or not. And then you work people down in the funnel. So say, for instance, if you take a look at my content, right? My Twitter stuff is really out there for everybody. My YouTube series is really out there for everybody. The times that I interact with the community in SPG, that's out there for everybody, so that the barrier to entry to be surface level introduced to me is very low. For the most part, the things that I put out there to be free, it is my best stuff, but it's not tailored to individuals a lot of the time. And people will go out of their way to have content tailored to them or specifics. I know Moonlight Maps does this as well, in which they have built their community up really to a very large scale, and their model is adventures, maps, and they run it through their Patreon. And of course, they're an artist, so they can do that. And they interact with their community quite frequently. And I had this good experience with them as well, where I just suggested a map and they made it. And then they put that on their, regular offering. So it's a matter of slow and steady, like creating content and then putting it out there, and that's it. Like if you are actually a writer or a game designer, you just need to put more content out there, and then eventually people will either like it or they won't like it. Like that's it. It's as simple as that. You need to remove barriers for people to find your content because there is so much out there in order to build that credibility and build an audience. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, thanks so much. So it sounds like in terms of diversifying that content is diversifying like your space a good way to build an audience, like just trying to like I mentioned two things, Twitter and Reddit. Is it worthwhile to try Instagram, or is it better to kind of laser focus on one place and try and build up there, or try to wait for, I don't know, the next TikTok platform to like try and jump in on that thing? Any ideas on that?
Yeah, always better to laser focus. You're a human being, you're not a robot. So if you are creating content in one place, you're going to get really good at creating content in that one place. And then that is where your content is going to live. That's why I don't post YouTube videos too often, and why I haven't in a couple of months, because I'm more focused on Twitter. Like right now I'm focused on building up my audience to pay attention to the book that we're releasing next year on Kickstarter, The Vineyard. And that's like really my main focus. How do I reach the widest possible audience? It's not by posting videos to YouTube. YouTube would take me 2 or 3 years in order to build. That's just content that I put out there to be helpful to the community once in a while when I find some extra time to do it. And then stuff like my podcast on my Patreon, that's open to public. If people want to throw extra money at me, then they can come here and ask me questions directly. You know what I mean? So I think that laser focusing on one and learning it is very important. I think for Twitter and me, I already had copywriting experience. I have a lot of writing background. So if you're a writer, I think Twitter is probably the best platform besides Reddit. And then also like the reach and like everything else is much greater than Reddit in some ways. Ultimately, it depends on whether or not you want to monetize or whether or not you just want to build for fun or something like that. I would pick a platform that you have fun on and that you enjoy rather than something that you think is going to be quote unquote good. That's not going to do you any favors, especially in the long run. Because if you, like, I don't like TikTok. So I'm not going to build on TikTok because, like, I don't have fun making content there. So why would I torture myself to some, like, algorithm that I don't want to have to worry about? So instead, what I did was I just built up and I really learned Twitter and laser focused on that in order to get good at that. It took me about 3 months to get good, and then I had a viral thread, and then from there it's just been momentum since. So I would say that put in the work consistently 2 or 3 times a week, learning a platform, how to produce content on that platform, follow people within the niche of the content that you want to create, and then model some of your content after them, see what works for you. Your first 3 or 4 months on a platform, you're really just exploring and figuring out what works and what's not good. Um, and then, yeah, the main thing being produce good content. But like, you have two things you're doing. You're getting better at making content, and then you're getting better at adjusting your content to fit on this platform because different styles and different approaches for different platforms are going to work.
Yeah, awesome. For folks that are sort of getting started with like SPG, um, do you feel like the SPG alone is enough for, like, if people are just on SPG and like their Discord? Do you think that's enough to like get players in seats and to be kind of monetizing your time as a professional dungeon master or game master, or do you feel like it's really necessary for folks to have that presence on a, or at least try to be building a presence on some kind of social media platform?
If you're trying to make your primary income and switch over to full-time GMing on SPG, you do not need a social media platform to make it work. SPG has done a fantastic job in doing the advertising for you, so it's completely unnecessary. The only reason that I am building up a social platform and things like that is because I am moving into publishing and like opening up a game studio eventually. So I'm building like an entire entertainment brand and everything like that. And like being a freelancer in other areas makes it kind of important that I have a presence in that way to make those network connections. Um, for just running games though, no, absolutely not. SPG mastering the thumbnail and title game is going to be number one for you. And then everything else is secondary. Because if you master the thumbnail and title game on getting your advertisements and getting those people to be interested in your game for the right reasons, then you're going to move to a full-time income. My social media presence was not a determining factor of my growth until Gen Con, like 2 months ago, 3 months ago, when I started to get a lot of attention because of Twitter. And I'm talking 300,000 impressions for my threads. And before that, not it was not something that made a big difference for me. And just to put that in perspective, like a 300,000 impression Twitter thread is like something that does well for someone that has like 40,000 followers. So like we're talking like I massively overperform on Twitter for my size. So an average person who is good on Twitter is not going to see that kind of growth or impact on their social media until they're much larger. I know plenty of pro GMs who have like a much bigger platform than me that do not get any sort of leads or sales through their Twitter because their brand isn't built around pro GMing. Mine is. So mine is laser focused on that audience, and I built around the fact that I am a professional GM. I run all of these games all the time. I know what I'm doing, and I provide a good experience to people. Whereas most people who've built their Twitter are kind of like in a few different areas, and they're better at attracting a different kind of audience, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's great. Cool. Um, well, man, capitalizing on all this time here, this is great. Friday, what I guess I want to ask you, I in the for folks who are familiar with SPG and have done like the onboarding and stuff. they kind of cover this. I wanted to bounce it off you again, if that's okay. And that's talking about like the on Start Playing Games, the content that sells during the onboarding. They kind of like, they mentioned like, just run the stuff that you want, like if you want to play homebrew campaigns, that's just your own stuff, your own world, do it. You don't have to run, Curse of Strahd if you don't want to. You don't have to run Dragon Heist if you don't want to. Run stuff that you want to run because you're going to have fun doing it, and ultimately that's I agree with that. For if you're someone who like, so for me personally, I like to be open to running anything, and in a way, like I would have fun running like any kind of D&D content, whether it was homebrew or like published module adventures by Wizards of the Coast or other third party content creators. Have you seen any like particular success running one or the other, like homebrew stuff versus like published material?
For me, I built a majority of my platform initially, at least through SPG, and like built my audience, I should say, and my paying players through modules that people knew. So I tried out a few different modules when I was sort of growing, and I tried out Lost Mine of Phandelver, Icewind Dale, and Curse of Strahd. And the big hits were Curse of Strahd. That was it. So what I ended up doing, and this is a part of when I say that you use momentum when you scale. So when you fill up a table, you open up another of that game. So say you get 6 players in your Strahd game, that means that you need to open up another Strahd game because people want to play Strahd with you. So if you want to do that, I should say. If you don't really like Strahd, then obviously don't open up 6 Strahd games like I have. But I have since like diversified because I realized like, you definitely don't want to only be running one campaign because then you're limiting yourself for those people that want to play with you more than one time a week. But when I was initially getting started, I only had like 1 or 2, like I put all the Strahd games on one day until I went from 1 Strahd game on Saturday to 3 Strahd games on Saturday, and I just opened them up one table at a time. And then from there, I've kind of branched out to Strahd all over the week. But for the most part, because campaigns have that name brand recognition, you're always going to have an easier time getting your profile going, especially if you're new. If you are building up brand new on SPG, I would say you need to leverage that WotC marketing power as much as possible. Because when people see Curse of Strahd or Icewind Dale, Rime of the Frost Maiden, they already know whether or not they want to play that campaign because they've heard something about it. And in marketing, we have this concept like the 8 impressions before someone makes a decision to buy. So someone's going to see Coca-Cola 8 times before they decide to buy a Coke in their lifetime. So that same thing needs to be cognizant of, you need to be cognizant of that sort of effect on people. So why fight uphill with a brand new concept if people don't know who you are? People don't know who you are as a brand new DM. They don't know your branding. So it's more difficult to convince someone to play something with you unless you are relating some content that they fully understand. And we go back to like the thumbnail and title mixed together. You are trying to create a feeling and an understanding of what the game is. There is no quicker way to do that than to provide them with the tagline Curse of Strahd, because they know a lot of things about Curse of Strahd already, probably, or they've heard that it's a great campaign. So you've already impressed upon that person all of these different thought bubbles about what they're going to experience. And then later on, maybe you narrow that down and you get more specific about what exactly is going to be in that campaign. But you start out with really just, what is it? And then you say that in one sentence and with the thumbnail combined with that. So if you are trying to run homebrew campaigns, I will tell you that I wish you the best of luck, but it's probably not going to be easy for you. Just like it's not easy to run a non-D&D system when you're starting out, because most of the audience is in D&D, right? So you just have less customers. So until you have built up an audience, I think it's more important that especially if you need the money, like you're doing this like you're seriously trying to make some money and like build up your brand and everything. I think it's more important that you just get more experience in building up an audience. And then from that audience, eventually you're going to find players that are more interested in different stuff. Or they like you so much that they will play whatever you run. And then you just start the campaign with those players who automatically want to play what you run. Like for my Alien table, I opened up an Alien game on Sunday and I have just 3 people waiting to play. And I am twice the price of every other Alien table on SPG. So what that says to me is that these players love to play with me and they know what the experience is going to be like because they've played with me previously, or they have heard X, Y, and Z about me through my branding and or my overall just presence, right? So you can't really do that when you're starting out for obvious reasons because people are paying for what they know is like a guarantee or what they feel is like what they're going to actually get. Um, so for something like a more niche experience, homebrew, anything like that, it's just harder to get that sale for that reason. It's harder to convey what it is.
Right. Yeah. I was curious about that. If you had players that were maybe came in on like your Curse of Strahd campaign and then later transitioned over to your more, I don't know if you run any homebrew campaigns, but or just more like Alien is less well known than 5e
Right.
D&D.
Yeah. I would say at least in the tabletop list, people are interested in Alien. Overall, worldwide, Alien, of course, is like a huge IP. But for tabletop for sure, not as popular. I'm experimenting with like some other different stuff, homebrew in Exandria, but with something like Critical Role World, like Exandria, I am bypassing a lot of the hurdles that I would have to do to run a homebrew campaign because I've already attached like this is Exandria, it's high quality. Like everybody knows that about that world, right? And there are a bunch of people interested in playing in a Critical Role world. There's a built-in audience for that. So if you want to start out and you want to do homebrew stuff, I would recommend that you just attach it to a very popular IP that already has a built-in audience who are willing to pay money to play it.
That's cool. Do you feel like it's worthwhile to be really upfront about that? Like for example, for my Curse of Strahd listing, like the headline is like Ravenloft colon domain of the first vampire, and then later it says Curse of Strahd.
Mm-hmm.
With the idea that I'm kind of open to, it's not necessarily like a verbatim. We're going to play through Curse of Strahd page by page, but rather we're going to just like play in Barovia.
Right.
Do you think people show up like? It's like obviously they're not. I hope they're not showing up like I've read Curse of Strahd and I'm ready to play it. Hopefully that's not the case, but
Mm-hmm.
that kind of being open that it's like this is kind of my Barovia that we're going to play in because I want to tailor this experience to you and your players, your characters, and your tastes. I don't want to just like run you through a script.
Right. So I would say if you are doing something like you have to like kind of make a judgment call on whether or not something is going to be popular enough for you to utilize it when it's a proper noun. Ravenloft is probably one of the few words that you can use like that is not an adventure path module or whatever you want to call it title. The only reason why like someone would ever use the word Netherdeep is because it is associated with the Critical Role campaign. Just like the only reason someone would use the word Fandelver. You would never use that word in a title. Otherwise, you would call it like, I don't know, adventure to save the dwarf. Like, save Gundren. Save your dwarf friend. Whatever. Discover adventure or discover the what is the forge of it's
Oh yeah,
the forge. You know what I'm talking about.
Forge of Spells or something.
Yeah. Forge of spells. Anyway, whatever it's called. But you would have that because that's like plain language. Like, here's what we're doing. Here's the goal. Here's how I evoke these images in your head because words have meaning, right? So if I throw a word at a customer and they're not familiar with what Ravenloft is, that word is meaningless and it's wasted space. And then that creates ambiguity. If someone has ambiguity when they're looking at your title or your copy in any way, then they're not going to be interested because it means nothing to them. Therefore, your copy should be written at like a 9th or 10th grade level, so that you are creating this feeling that they understand what they're getting right away. So instead of Ravenloft, I would actually recommend that you just do um, something along the lines of like horror campaign, because if you do that, you're clearly conveying what it is. Just like you wouldn't use anything like it would be difficult to justify using anything other than Barovia as a proper noun, in my opinion, because Barovia is pretty ubiquitous. Everybody knows what that is if they play D&D. If they don't play D&D or they're new to D&D, they have no idea what Barovia is, and you've just wasted that word. And now they have no context for what it is that's happening, especially if your thumbnail isn't already conveying what it is. So I would avoid as much as possible stuff that is meaningless to the layperson, and the layperson meaning the brand new beginner. A majority of your clients for pro GMing are going to be beginners. So that's who you should be writing your copy to, especially as a new GM. Once you have been in the game and you have a built-in audience, maybe you can start catering to a more hardcore audience who like knows more stuff. But like that's not going to get you anything when you're starting out, because it's such a niche part of the market, that you want to, when you start, capture as many players as possible so you can filter them down to the players who are going to be loyal to your brand and most interested in playing with you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. Um, yeah, that's great. Sorry, now I'm like in my head, like thinking about all my headlines and like thinking of
Mm-hmm.
ambiguous words to make sure I can get rid of. That's great.
Yeah, I'm looking at your titles right now. They look pretty. They look pretty decent. They look good. Do you have seat fillers? It looks like you do.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Oh, that's a good question here. Do you ever have seat fillers who are people that don't actually show up?
Ooh.
Like, does that make sense?
Yeah. Don't keep them around. I just filter people for seat filling positions that I'm interested in playing with. Generally, it's people that I have some rapport with already and I want to play with. So I know that they are gonna be like a fun person to play with. Whereas if you're just like rolling the dice on whoever, then you get what you get, kind of deal. So
Right, right. Yeah, I've been trying to hook that like one other GM that can just like we can trade off places and come one
right,
to one. That's uh something
the
that
dream,
yeah, the dream, right?
the
Uh
dream. Yeah,
and cool. That was yeah, I was curious about and kind of again, this is coming from a place of ignorance that I'm just kind of new. It's not necessarily that the person didn't show up. It was I was genuinely curious if it's just like what about just having that number that says like there are people in this game,
oh,
even if you're like if you're just a seat filler, so it's a session 0, you don't have to come, and I'll just say like, oh, maybe they're late or they didn't come.
I would avoid as much as possible being dishonest. So for obvious reasons, but like, yeah, sometimes stuff does happen and like your seat filler can't make it or whatever. But like, if you find out about that, you just need to get a new seat filler, because the players are expecting that someone else is showing up. And as much as possible, just like you wouldn't want to mislead people with your ad copy, you don't want to mislead people with seat fillers. So if you're utilizing seat fillers, for sure, they are there to enhance the experience of your paying players. They're there to be helpful to your newbies. They're there to roleplay and be fun and stuff like that. So, yeah, for sure. You want to get a solid seat filler if you can, and if it doesn't work out, get a replacement.
Cool. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's good to know. Thank you. Sorry for the dead air. Do you edit your podcasts
Not this
afterward.
one. This is going right here. This is going right in there.
This is
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, I just downloaded it and I uploaded right away. I don't make enough money on Patreon to spend a ton of time editing it. When I do make enough money on Patreon, I will start editing my podcast. But right now, the cost to labor is not there. So yeah, people get the little bit of dead air, and that's fine with me. Did you have any more questions? Because if not, we can wrap.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I wasn't sure if you're like, I'm going to be here for 2 hours. So, yeah, no, I think those were the two kind of main points,
Hmm.
or the two things I wanted to talk about was like kind of building an audience, whether if it was necessary to have like this presence on social media, to find success on, SPG, which, yeah, seems like that's not the case. You can do well without it. That's great.
Hmm.
And then talking about what kind of like especially 5e content sells the best. Like we talked about, of course, like Curse of Strahd, super popular. You can try and run your own homebrew stuff, and that's great. Do it. Other GMs, if you're listening, just like do whatever you think is fun, but also you'll find a lot of success if you just do the stuff that people know. That's yeah. Those were the two
Yeah.
things I wanted to talk about.
Yeah, especially if you're just starting out. That's probably the number one takeaway that I have with people is like, if you are trying to build your audience and it's a real big struggle to force yourself to do something that WotC puts out, then you might consider like doing something that Paizo puts out. You might consider doing something that, I don't know, that is equally as popular. Maybe something that Darrington Press has put out, something that Critical Role has put out that already has a built-in audience. Otherwise, it's like it's going to be very frustrating starting out because it is what it is. Majority of the audience is owned by WotC. What are you going to do?
Yeah, exactly. So cool. Hey, thanks so much, Friday. I really
Yeah,
appreciated the
thanks for
one-on-one
coming on.
advice. I hope
Yeah,
I'm excited. Do you do this every week, or is this a
yeah,
once a month thing?
I'll do it randomly. I also do a different podcast with like industry pros, but yeah, I'll do this maybe twice a month, maybe. So if you have other questions you want to show up again, and then we have other people that are showing up for these, then we'll keep doing it. But this is something that I wanted to offer because I get DMs all the time about like questions and stuff, and I'd rather just do it in a way that I can put it out for everybody else to enjoy as well.
Yeah, awesome. Kind of start creating that catalog of advice in a listenable format. Cool. I'm excited
Yeah,
to
for
check out
sure.
the other podcast too. That's on your Patreon?
Yeah, the Dollars and Dragons podcast is free, so you don't need to be a patron to listen. Everybody listening to this will be a patron though.
All right.
Okay.
Well, Friday, you're awesome. Thank you so much. Have
All
a
right.
good rest of your evening or afternoon. I don't know what
It's
time it is there.
afternoon. I'm in Pacific, but yeah, take care.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks, Friday. Bye.